So we don't know if the jet that the Indian Air Force shot down came from Jordan or America. But we do know that both the Americans and the Pakistanis are tying themselves up in knots, trying to falsify the fact that an F-16 was shot down by an Indian MiG. And we hope that this explanation will put pay to all the unfounded reports and speculation. Now let's come to our top story tonight. A peace process that is going nowhere. It was unprecedented, a move to engage the Taliban, with the Taliban in fact, to bring peace in Afghanistan. Last year, the Trump administration embarked on a rather tricky mission. They wanted to rein in the Taliban through dialogue. But all those plans are now falling apart. The peace dialogue has hit a dead end. The U.S. envoy negotiating the peace deal was in Pakistan today, and that should explain the deadlock. With partners like the Pakistanis, what did they expect? But Mr. Khalilzad, the U.S. envoy for these talks, was looking to make some headway with the Taliban. So what was he doing in Pakistan? Because the Taliban are backed by the Pakistani military establishment, they hold some sway. But this trip yielded little. There was no solution in sight. There is no solution in sight. The Taliban have rejected America's power-sharing formula. On the upside, they say that they're ready to hold talks with some sections of the government in Afghanistan. These are terrorists, and they are dictating terms, and America is playing ball at the expense of the Afghan government. In fact, the Americans find themselves helpless here. They've relapsed into an old bad habit, the habit of relying on Pakistan. The U.S. wants Islamabad to convince the Taliban. That's the reason why U.S. Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad went to Pakistan. Washington is looking for a quick resolution to the war in Afghanistan. President Donald Trump wants to pull out 14,000 American troops from there. But as far as Afghanistan is concerned, they do not want Pakistan involved at any level. Last month, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan suggested that Kabul should put an interim government in place for the peace negotiations. Afghanistan was furious. They recalled their ambassador and they asked Mr. Imran Khan to keep his advice to himself.
برای پاکستان هم برای یک بار و برای همیشه باید به این نتیجه رسیده باشه و برسه که حق تعیین سرنوشت مربوط به مردم افغانستان است. مردمی که خواستار صلح با هم و با دیگران هستند و مردم افغانستان نیت خود در این راستا نشان دادند و حکومت وحدت ملی با اقدامات دیپلماتیک جواب گفته به این مسئله.
Unfortunately, Afghanistan is watching its own peace process from the sidelines. Kabul has been left out of these talks. The American government has failed to take the Afghanistan government into confidence. Reports say that American officials in Afghanistan have repeatedly walked out of talks with the country's national security advisor. So has this ploy delivered? So far, the Americans have made progress on two aspects. One, the withdrawal of American troops, and two, protecting Americans and their allies on Afghan soil. So basically, they've secured concessions only for themselves and their friends. What happens to peace in Afghanistan? No one knows. The Taliban refused to meet with the Ashraf Ghani-led government in Afghanistan. The country is scheduled to have presidential elections soon, and it stares at uncertainty. Meanwhile, the Taliban strikes continue, notwithstanding the peace talks. If anything, the attacks have intensified. On Thursday, the Taliban attacked the Afghan security forces in Badghis, that is a province in Pakistan. Badghis is close to the border with Turkmenistan. It has witnessed fighting between the Taliban and the security forces in the past as well. Now, this one was a major attack. The Taliban stormed into a compound that belonged to the Afghan government. At least 20 soldiers and policemen were killed. Around 600 personnel of the Afghan security forces are deployed in Badghis, and this attack has put their lives in danger. Zalmay Khalilzad, the U.S. peace negotiator, has some major challenges before him. Afghanistan seems to have lost all faith in him. The National Security Advisor of Afghanistan has accused Mr. Khalilzad of lack of transparency. He's even suggested that Mr. Khalilzad wants to be the viceroy of Afghanistan. In an attempt to rebuild ties, Mr. Khalilzad just spent 5 days in Afghanistan. And today he's made his way to Pakistan. There he held talks with Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and the Pakistani Army Chief, General Qamar Bajwa. And this move is unlikely to win him any more trust in Kabul. So essentially, this peace process has been reduced to a dialogue between America and the Taliban. Those who have followed U.S. foreign policy for decades cannot help but compare the situation with the war in Vietnam. In both cases, the insurgents controlled the countryside. In both cases, the Americans tried to win back lost territory through airstrikes. And again, in both cases, their approach failed. It has been 17 years since the war in Afghanistan began for America. At least 3 presidents have overseen this battle on the monster they themselves helped create, the Taliban. So now Donald Trump wants to leave Afghanistan in haste. What's the hurry, you may ask? The next presidential election in America is due in 2020. That is next year. To appeal to his electorate, Trump wants to bring his troops home. The question then is, can the talks with the Taliban bring peace to Afghanistan? The jury is still out on that one. For now, though, the United States, led by its special envoy, the Afghan-born Zalmay Khalilzad, is holding talks with the representatives of the Taliban. All this in a bid to make a future deal palatable to all the stakeholders, including, most importantly, the Afghans. Khalilzad is also talking to regional players such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Pakistan. In fact, he held another round of talks in Islamabad this morning, as I just said. For its part, the Taliban is driving a hard bargain. It is holding on to its stated position of only talking to the US and no one else, not even the government in Kabul. Among the other issues under discussion are a ceasefire, a timetable for withdrawal of US troops, not allowing the US to use Afghan soil to launch terrorist attacks against America and its allies. This is for the Taliban. An interim government in Afghanistan, release of prisoners and lifting of travel ban, among other things. The history of the world is replete with instances of governments alternatively talking to and fighting against terrorist groups. The African National Congress in South Africa, the Irish Republican Army in Ireland and the Palestine Liberation Organization are examples of banned outfits getting a seat at the negotiating table. But Al-Qaeda, or the so-called Islamic State, are seen as groups that are beyond the pale. In the case of the Taliban, neither the United Nations nor the United States designates the Taliban as a terrorist group. In fact, Russia is the only P5 country that calls the Taliban a terrorist outfit. Only the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the TTP, is banned by the United Nations, the United States and the UK, among others. So the question is this: can the Taliban be trusted? And this question can be answered with another question: does a leopard ever change its spots? But more importantly, is the world willing to trust the Taliban